We're going to talk to a guy who says that, hey, we are all missing the point. We're missing the point when it comes to the Rob Ford fiasco.
Jeff MacArthur on AM 640.
All right, when it comes to the Rob Ford fiasco, the ongoing Rob Ford saga, there's been lots of talk about whether or not the mayor should resign. Does he have a problem or not? Is his brother, Doug Ford, is he an enabler? But today we spent a few good moments with a man who says, actually, we're missing the point when it comes to the Rob Ford fiasco. Ahmad Hussein is the president of the Canadian Somali Congress, and he says the arrest in Project Traveler and Rob Ford's association with them has smeared all Somalis. And he joins us on Talk Radio in Toronto, AM 640. Mr. Hussein, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
First off, why do you find this so troubling?
I find it troubling because the media, in its efforts to go after Rob Ford, has not given enough context to the Canadian Somali community. And as a result, we've had our image smeared by this whole saga. And we're quite concerned about it. And also, the media hasn't put this whole Project Traveler in the proper context that it should in terms of discussing our community.
Okay, in other words, we've been concentrated on Rob Ford, the mayor of the city, and again, whether he has been involved with the drug trade, and instead we should be looking at Project Traveler as a whole and the arrests that were made?
Yes, and also we should also be looking at the factors that are occurring inside this community to then result in things like Project Traveler. The best way to fight crime and to make sure that these things don't happen in the future is to enable this community to integrate into the Canadian mainstream as quickly as possible. That way you don't have to deal with guns and gangs and drugs, because young men will not drop out of high school if you put in enough supports to deal with those kinds of issues. And quite frankly, the more this goes on, the less those kinds of discussions can be had, and nothing will be done. We'll still be talking about Rob Ford a few months from now. And that's the shameful part about all of this.
Well, a couple of things about that. First and foremost, you must understand why Rob Ford is the headline, the obvious headline here.
Sure, I do. But what I'm saying is the media has been quite lazy in terms of giving the full picture about all of this. Every day that we talk about Rob Ford in the context of the Canadian Somali community is one extra day that we're not talking about the successes of this community and also the challenges that need to be addressed in terms of integrating this community into Toronto's mainstream, life.
Okay, that's the other part I wanted to ask you about. Are you suggesting that it's Toronto's fault here? It's the Canadian Society's fault that these young men in particular of Somali descent have not integrated?
No. I'm not pointing fingers at. I mean, we're part of this community. We're Canadians. So what I'm talking about is we're all in the same boat. We should be talking about things like why does the Canadian Somali community have a 40% dropout rate of young males in the Toronto District School Board? That, to me, is a bigger story than Rob Ford.
Okay, and why is that then? Let's get to the causes here.
Sure. I think it's a lack of proper integration. I think we're still talking about settlement of refugees when we've settled in this country for 3 decades. And so we've had governments that can't transition from settlement of immigrants to integration of Canadians. That's the crux of the matter.
Okay, but again, what's the problem? Because I'm having trouble getting my head around it, and I think others listening maybe, the problems of integration here, and why is it that these young men, 40% of Somali immigrants, have dropped out of high school and have turned to guns, turned to drugs, turned to crime?
Well, some of them have. I don't mean to suggest that all of them have done that, but
sure.
I think the reason why you're having difficulty with this is because the conventional conversation in this country has always been about multiculturalism, which is really degenerated into song and dance. We really don't talk about this country, we don't talk about integration enough. And what these communities need is they need integration. By that I mean access to jobs and professions, true access to educational opportunities, and support systems that guarantee that we all succeed together as Canadians, not as these communities that are in silos. And I also take responsibility for the fact that our community has to do more to also integrate. I accept that. This is not a finger-pointing exercise, but I really think that multiculturalism has to be re-examined, and we have to start integrating people as Canadians and move on from this cultural song and dance business that really doesn't help anybody.
All right, and that is an important part of the story that is being missed here because Rob Ford is such a focus point of this. And would you suggest if Rob Ford, if it bears out that the mayor has been involved, and we've seen the famous photos of him with some of the, I think it's the Dixon Bloods they're described as, and men of the Somali community here, that he's actually helped in the problems you've been talking about, discussing here?
First of all, if that emerges, it'll send a very awful signal to all Torontonians because the mayor is a public official and he has to set an example to all the young people in the city. And if he's cavorting if it emerges that he's cavorting with these people, then it really sets a bad example for all of us as Torontonians.
Sure, because he's supposed to be, of course, as a chief magistrate, fighting against this sort of thing, not being a part of it.
Correct. And by the way, I want to emphasize one thing. There's no such thing as the Somali community. We are Canadians of Somali background, and we need to be part of, we're all in the same boat. And if 40% of our community, the young males, are dropping out of high school, that should be as equally concerning to you as it is to me, because we all succeed together, we all fail together. That's my understanding of Canada, correct?
Sure. So, and again, this is a story that you believe is being missed out on here, that, the press is always, they head right for the headline here and don't really kind of delve beyond that.
Absolutely. And by the way, speaking of that, I really appreciate the fact that AM 640 has taken the time to address that missing point. And I have to, I wouldn't be honest if I didn't appreciate the fact that you guys are trying to change that by giving me the opportunity to address that missed point. So I want to thank you for that.
And I thank you for your time with us this afternoon, Mr. Hussein.
You're most welcome. Thank you, sir.
There goes Ahmad Hussein, the national president of the Canadian Somali Congress, who again says when it comes to the Rob Ford story, we really are missing the point, that we need to really look beyond just the headline here and what is going on in that community in Etobicoke, and particularly the arrest with a Project Traveler.